All right, y'all, we are going to work up a gauge swatch so we can work up the Belinda boat neck. I have my Barocco Comfort DK weight yarn. Any number 3 lightweight yarn should work well for this. Lion Brand Mandala is another good one you can use. And I have my 3.5 millimeter size E Odyssey hook. And these are the hook size and yarn I use for this pattern. Working up a gauge swatch is going to tell us if you should use the same hook size or if you should change it. Gauge is important for sweaters because you want them to fit, and that's how you make yours match mine for the pattern. Now for this pattern we're going to need a stitch multiple of 4, and the gauge is 20 stitches in 4 inches. And for this pattern, the stitch gauge is most important versus the row gauge, or how tall your stitches are. So we're going to focus on that one. So in order to get a 4-inch swatch, we need bigger than 20 stitches. So we are going to chain 24, which will give us our 20 stitches plus 4 more. And that way we can do our measuring. Our edges are generally not to be counted for gauge because they can be a bit more inconsistent than the main stitch pattern. So with your yarn and hook, work up a chain of 24. 23, 24. Okay, in the 5th chain from your hook, we're going to place 2 double crochets. I am working to the back of my chains. And these skipped stitches are going to count as a double crochet. Our first stitch is here, and then our 2 double crochets we just made. Right next to these 2, in the very next chain, we're going to place 2 more. So here we have our stitch that we're going to use, 2 double crochets next to 2 double crochets. Then we're going to skip 2 chains and work, getting my chain all twisty here, 1, 2, skip 2 chains and work 2 double crochets in the next. In the very next stitch, we're going to work 2 double crochets. Okay, now we repeat that across. Skip 2, work 2 double crochets and 2 double crochets. Keep repeating that until we have 2 chains left. All right, so on my last 2 chains, I'm going to skip 1 and just place a double crochet in the very last one. And that is how row 1 of our pattern will look, as well as our gauge swatch. Okay, can just do a quick check here to see how we're doing on our gauge. And it looks like we're spot on. Now, if you've been crocheting for any length of time, you know that after row 1 sometimes your stitch tends to increase. So it's important to work up a few rows, and if your row height is just as important, like in a raglan or top-down style, your row height's going to be important. You definitely need to work up all the way to the 4 inches to make sure you can meet row height as well. Like I said, for this one, we're mostly focused on stitch height. Okay, so row 2, we turn. We're going to start with a chain 3. I'll do an alternative chain 3, which I can link up for you in the description if you need more details on how to do this. Skip the first double crochet, place 2 in the second. Then place 2 double crochets in the next stitch. So we're stacking them. Now we're going to skip 2 double crochets and work 2 into the next double crochet. Now we'll work 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Skip 2 double crochets, work 2 double crochets into the next stitch. And 2 double crochets into the one right after that. Skip 2, work 2 in the same stitch. And we're going to work 2 again in the very next stitch. Skip 2, we're on our last set here. Work 2 double crochets and try that again. And work 2 double crochets in the next one. Okay, so now we're left with 2 stitches, our last double crochet and then our chains, which count as a double crochet. So in this very top one here, we're going to work our last double crochet of the row. Okay, so that's row 2. Now the rest of this swatch and the rest of your garment is just a repeat of row 2. You can see it's not increasing greatly. We've got our 20 stitches in 4 inches. So now we're just going to work and repeat row 2 until we have at least 4 so we can check our row height, which right now we have about 2 in the 1 inch range, so we can do some math and figure that out. But our foundation or chain row is never a good place to count since it's slightly different. Okay, so go ahead and work up the rest of your swatch, and then we are going to wash it and block it, because when we're making garments, that means we're making clothes that we're going to want to wash. So we have to treat our swatch the same way to make sure our yarns behave the same way. Cotton, wool, acrylic, those all can behave differently to water and washing and blocking. So work up your 4x4 swatch at least, a little larger is recommended, and then we'll meet back here to wash and block it. Okay, so we have our little swatch worked up to check our gauge, and then we're going to block it. So my little gauge ruler here is super quick and easy to check rows and stitches, so I know I have 4 groups of 4 and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I've got 20 stitches in 4 inches across, so my gauge is good there. And then I count my rows up, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and there's 11 right there, but right now I have 10 in 4 inches. I believe my gauge is 11, but I haven't blocked it yet, so this isn't my final number. So if it stretches in length to add us another row or close to that, we're good. If it stretches a lot in width, then our gauge is off and we'll have to adjust. So to block it, you have to wash it, you have to get it wet, you can spray it, you can soak it, you can throw it in the washing machine. I recommend treating it how you're going to treat your garment. So use your label. Mine can be machine washed and tumbled dry. So if I had a load of laundry ready, I'd just toss it in there and let it wash and dry and see how it works out, and then make adjustments for there. Follow the directions on yours and then measure again. So where are my scissors? There. Cut this and pull it through. So I'm going to go ahead and wet mine and leave it to dry and then measure again. And then we can decide if we have to adjust our hook size or not. Now I have it all wet, and I have pressed out as much water as I could with my hand. Do not wring it. You don't want to stretch or compromise your yarn. So now I'm going to lay it on a towel and just fold over one part, and I'm pressing with my fingers. I'm not rubbing, okay? Again, depending on what kind of yarn you're using, you'll have to be more gentle, but I'm trying to show you the most gentle way to do it. So I'm pressing out water. It's just a small swatch. If you have a, when you do your garment, you can roll it up if you need to press out more. Just this little swatch, I'll be able to get most of the water out just by pressing on different dry spots on the towel. Okay, so I can feel that it's damp, it's not dripping, okay? So now I'm going to use a foam board, or if you don't have a blocking board like this, you can just use a dry towel and have a clean table or bed to lay it out on to let it dry undisturbed. Let's see. So we'll need some pins to pin it in place. This is where you do any smoothing or shaping. We just have a straight square right here, and even our garment pattern is just 2 rectangles, so it's super simple. But if you had any shaping, you would position this here with your hands gently, pin it in place, try not to stretch or misshape anything. So my end is not weaved in here, so I'm going to go in on that one because that will stretch funny. Okay, so again, simple square, you probably don't need to put this many pins, but you know, with your chain row, it gets a little wonky, so you can just put them so that it's nice and neat and square. You see, I haven't overstretched it or understretched it, okay? Once you get your full garment made, the weight of the garment itself is going to stretch it longer anyway, but we don't want to exaggerate it right now. And you know, if your stitches are a little smaller and you need to stretch it out wider, you can try to do that, but your yarn will take the shape it's going to take. So it can only stretch so much, basically, unless you have like a super stretchy yarn. But even then, it will tighten up some after it dries. So set your swatch somewhere nice and you know, warm, good ventilation, nothing too humid to let it dry, and then we'll measure again and make sure that we are in range. Okay, so my swatch is dry and I've unpinned it, so now we can double check our gauge, and it will be more closely resembling what will actually happen with our sweater stitches. So you can see that, let's see, here we go. We're getting about the same number of stitches across. I've got groups of 4, and I have 5 of them. 4, let's see, trying to get that in there. For my rows here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and some change there, 10 1/4. I might just call that 10 if I do it this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So I've got 10 rows that way. So if you have way more rows, then you'll need to re-swatch with a different hook size, a bigger hook size. But usually with row gauge you can just make more or less rows to make your garment pieces longer or shorter depending on your gauge. The more important one is usually stitch gauge, and so if you are getting more than 20 stitches in 4 inches for this pattern or whatever gauge pattern you're using, if you're getting more, then your stitches are a lot smaller and you want to size up a hook. If you are getting less, then your stitches are a lot bigger and you want to size down a hook. So if you've gotten to this point and your stitches are good now, you're fine, you're ready to move on to making your panels. If you are off and you need to change a hook size, you need to swatch again. And I know that's a process to get the next hook size and try again, but you don't want to make a sweater's quantity worth of yarn to find out it doesn't fit. So hopefully you are on spot on gauge, but if not, you just need to swatch again. So here I have my finished garment, which I know you can't really see because I'm zoomed in, and I can put my little gauge square on here and see that I have 11 rows, whereas in my swatch I'm only getting 10. And like I said, that's because as the pattern grows and you put the weight of all that yarn, it's going to stretch them out looser, and so there's a difference there, right? But we can't work up a giant 20-inch panel for gauge. So row gauge, usually that's pretty typical for a garment to stretch more down than wide depending on the construction and whatnot. So okay, so hopefully you have your gauge swatch worked up, you know what yarn and hook you're going to use, and you're ready to get started on your panels.